Hello, everyone, and welcome back to From Grief to Purpose, where we share stories of strength, survival, and finding purpose after experiencing loss. I'm your host, as always, Coach Nina, a life coach specializing in grief and purpose empowerment, and a future therapist, currently pursuing my master's in mental and clinical health and school counseling. This podcast reflects my passion for helping people rediscover themselves and their purpose, even in the face of the most challenging life transitions. My own journey with grief, trauma, and loss has driven me to offer coaching in these areas and to pursue mental health as my calling. Now, I believe in the power of sharing stories, and that's exactly what we are going to do on today. I have a special guest for you all. Amanda Harris is going to be joining us and sharing her story with us. Now, I don't want to keep you. Are you ready to get into this particular episode with me? Well, let's get into it. All right, welcome back, you guys, once again. I am honored to introduce my guest, Amanda Harris, also known as Lady Poets. Amanda was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and grew up facing extreme challenges, including domestic violence, from a very young age. Despite these traumatic experiences, she has emerged as an empowering voice for survivors everywhere. Amanda is not only a poet and author of two powerful books, Back from Bondage, How I Broke Free, In His Eyes, Finding My Way Back to God, and In His Eyes, Finding My Way Back to God. But she's also a domestic violence advocate, a businesswoman, and co-host of the weekly podcast on YouTube, Open Letters to a Survivor. She uses her platform to support, along with her co-host, and uplift others who have walked similar paths. So today we're going to be exploring, everyone, the concept of self-loss, how trauma like what Amanda experienced can lead us to lose our sense of self and identity. So first of all, I had the honor of just getting to know you, Amanda, through another guest that I had on the show, Cassandra Williams, which is an actual co-host of the Open Letters to a Survivor podcast with you, and that's how we met. And then just after meeting, being on your podcast, because then you all invited me to be on your podcast and met you. You were just such a light and such a sweet
Thank
person,
you.
and you were like, just like because I mentioned I needed one was looking for blog contributors, and she was like, "Oh yes, I'll," So she is, just a special being, a special soul. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for joining us here and to be willing to tell a little bit about your story. We want to just want to, honor your process, have you share your journey with us. Of course, I'm going to get into all the questions and things that I have for you. But could you start by sharing just a little bit about your background and the challenges that you faced growing up in Cleveland? And if I missed anything in your bio, give us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, so thank you, and thank you for having me on the show today. So I'm very appreciative of this opportunity. So again, about me, I am Amanda Lady Poet Speaks Harris. I am a sexual abuse survivor as well as a human trafficking survivor that I went through in Cleveland, Ohio, as we stated, and it started at a young age. But through a lot of it, I am now the creator and founder of Open Letters to a Survivor podcast. And I'm now the author of three books. My last one titled Through the Cracks, and that's detailing my story, and two that will be released next year. One called Explicit, My Full Story, and Open Letters to My Past, Present, and Future Self. It's the book that will be released next year. Um, I am a licensed chemical dependency counselor. I am also a mentor, and I love helping people, and I'm a poet, of course.
Wow, beautiful. First of all, I love heard some certifications in there. Love that you're doing all of those things. 'Cause I love to hear and bring on stories from people that have just experienced losses, but they're still living. They're still wanting to advocate and just help and support others. So, as someone who went through so much at a young age, can you talk about what self loss looked like for you? Like, how did we get to that part? How did your trauma that you experienced as a child impact your self identity? If you wanted to share a little bit about what you went through that got you to
Okay.
that point.
So yeah, so I felt like personally, I lost myself before I even knew who I was.
Mm,
As a child, we develop our identities. We develop who we want to be. We develop into that person. And the core moments of my life, the abuse started when I was 8 years old. So, in those core moments, to have abuse starting and while you're also at school and you're learning to put together sentences, but you're also having to have these secrets that you're dealing with at home. So they're trying to transform you. The abusers are trying to transform you into who they think you need to be, while you're sitting up here in the school is trying to develop you into who they want you to be. But who am I? Who do I want to be? And I think that that was the problem that created the self loss, is the abuse, and then being scared, and then not knowing who I am, to now the school trying to make me into something else, and then labeling you as troubled when you're not really troubled. You just have a lot that's going on, and instead of them taking the time out to see what was going on, they just throw these labels on you to impact who you are in your future.
mm. Wow, especially when you're dealing with trauma, like as you mentioned, at a very young age. I can only imagine what you were also dealing with, like in school. Your mind, had to have been
Right.
someplace else, like all the time, and how hard it was for you to even focus on your studies. I think that's something that a lot of schools need to put more in place. There's actually trauma education now that they're incorporating. It's like a training program. They have it within master's programs too, to incorporate trauma informed education for educators to understand that just because the child is in school, what else are they facing at home? What
Right.
experiences are they facing, so they can't just label them and, for example, label them as a bad kid. When they're
Right.
acting out, there may be a reason, why that child is acting out, but what is the reason? So wow, were you able to like, what was school like for you as far as like studying? Were you able to um graduate with the standard that you wanted to, as far as like enjoying your experience with
Yeah.
school and things like that? Like, did you, or were you just did you were able to block some of it out, the experiences that you were having at home?
Yeah, so I do want to say too, in school I was bullied like really bad. I mean, I was always tall, like I'm 5'11" now. So I was always tall, and even in school I was tall, and because I was tall and had this big stature, like people wanted me to join gangs and I didn't. So because of that, I was beat up every single day, cuz they want to bully you into, they want to beat you up into this, and because I stood in that no caused me to be bullied like unmercifully throughout school. So went through that. However, through that, I did graduate a year early with a 4.0 GPA.
Nice.
So regardless of what I was going through, and regardless of them labeling me, I was still able to academically perform what I needed to, and that was to get work turned in, to do school, to do that. So I graduated with honors, and I graduated at the end of my 11th grade year.
Wow, I love that. First of all, not just because of the 4.0, but the graduation piece is important to me too, especially when you're going through a lot and being bullied on top of it all. I wish I was 5'11". Listen, I wish my mom was only 5'1", so that makes me 5'5". That's all I got. My dad was 6 foot. I wish I had some height. But bullies, of course, they're just anyone doing that type of thing as a child. They have things that are going on at home as well. But when you're a kid or you're a youth, you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about, okay, here we go again. Why is this person picking on me? I'm just trying to go to school. I got other stuff going on, in my life. But saying that to say this, too, like trauma has also just a way of not only hurting us physically and emotionally, like as you experienced, but it can also cloud who we are, as you mentioned as well. Just you lost yourself before you even had the opportunity to like find out who you were. So in your journey, how did you like recognize that you had lost yourself, and what steps did you take to begin rediscovering who you are? I think more so like at what point do you think, was it more as an adult as you started to learn about like what actually was transpiring, had taken place, has had such an effect of you, but what steps, when did you realize that, and what steps did you take to begin rediscovering who you were, or who you are, I
So
should say?
right. So I actually had struggled with it and I really didn't know what it was. I knew I had, like, I would get anxious about everything in my life. Like, everything caused me to freak out, stand up late, can't sleep because I'm just worried about everything all the time. Then I would go into deep depressions where I would be in bed for weeks at a time and not, doing that. But then I got to the point where I needed to do things, so I couldn't let those things stop me. So when I would still do it, I became angry because now here it is again. I'm doing something I don't want to do, and that's getting out of bed and going on with the day and doing it. So I became angry with everybody. And I think in my early 20s, when I started realizing why I was so angry and why everything made me angry, I realized it's because I don't know who I am. um who am I? Am I that little girl that they said was bad, that they put these labels on, that they said had PTSD, that they said had anxiety, that they said would never amount to anything because of the abuse I suffered? But here I am, still had a college degree at that time, an associate's degree, but I still wasn't fulfilled. I was working a good job, but I still wasn't fulfilled. And I think because those things didn't fulfill me, it was because I didn't know who I was. And it took a lot for me to be like, okay, I need the help because I was so used to doing everything by myself. I didn't have anybody. And it took me, I think at the age of 25, I can honestly say that that is really when I got the change. I'm 32 now, and I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
And so, with that, like when I became like 25 years old, I had a supervisor when I had an encounter with one of my abusers, and her name was Vicky, which is the one I wrote my second book about, In His Eyes, Finding My Way Back to God. And through Victoria being there for me, through Vicky being there, and not just being like a regular supervisor, okay, we'll get through it, it's going to be okay, but I mean walking actual steps with me because I was so used to either not being believed or people, just letting it slip under the rug that, I would keep everything to myself. And we laughed, but it was her nosiness that saved me. And so because she kept saying what's wrong and what's going on, and I'm telling her and I'm losing myself and I'm feeling these things in these moments. And it was through her walking with me that I started having a discovery. And yes, I had mentors there that was helping me before that were listening to me, that would guide me. I still felt lost. But it was
Mm.
somebody actually stepping in the fire with me that I think that it actually changed at that moment. And like I said, I had mentors that stepped in the fire with me, but the way she stepped in was a little bit different. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, that's when I realized, okay, I have to change these things in order to find who I am. And slowly but surely, I got my spunk back. I started realizing I like this and don't like that. I started saying, okay, well, this person who is Amanda? And now that I'm finding out who I am, who is Amanda, now who is Lady Poet, and how do I put this in this spot, but then also put this in that spot? So, in finding that, and I'm still in my healing journey, don't get me wrong, but and finding out what I liked and what I wanted to do, and stepping out on the things I like, which was starting an organization, which was becoming an author, which was reaching out and speaking to other people, in doing those things, I began to find who I was and also what I liked.
Wow. That's so beautiful. And it's so important to position yourself as human beings, let me say it like that, to be able to recognize when somebody else is not okay,
Right.
instead of just, how like sometimes I used to say this thing when I used to have teach classes for work. When we often pass by people, we're coming to work or we're just passing by, and we're saying, "Hey, how are you doing? How are you?" And you just keep it moving, right? Versus actually paying attention, to people that you've probably been passing by for years. And I'll put it in context to people that actually physically go to work, or even if you know someone, a friend, and you're not really paying attention to the signs, like, are they coming to work happy? Have you been paying attention to them? Are they depressed? Because oftentimes you can really see, if you've been around that person long enough. And then even I find that even if it's a stranger, you'd be surprised at how many people, if you just ask them how are they and really stop to listen to that person, it goes a long way,
Yes.
for that individual. So thank you so much for sharing that. And healing, it definitely is a journey. So don't feel rushed. I'm definitely still, healing through many things,
Right.
and I'm 45 years old. So it's just like, but what you have to unpack, especially if you've been one that have experienced any type of trauma, that's what you're like, it's like a suitcase. It's like, okay, I'm gonna take this out
Mm-hmm.
today, and I'll take this out next month, but it's just like, you have a lot to unpack. So definitely take your time. Now, my next question for you is, I want to talk about just a little bit about the forms of grief, and how it can take on many forms, and losing yourself, particularly through trauma, can trigger stages like shock and denial. How did these stages, I know you said that you were angry, I heard that word, which is of course one of the emotions of grief, but how did these stages of grief show up for you in your life, and how did you work through them? I know you mentioned your employee helped you go through some of the steps, which is so important, but did you seek therapy? Like, was it spiritual? Like, was it church? Was it, I mean, God? Like, what was it for you that helped you thoroughly?
So, anger showed up a lot in
Mm-hmm.
all kind of ways. I mean, I was the type that you say one wrong thing to me, I fly off the handle. Like I would just go scream, yell, just go off because I felt like I wasn't heard majority of my life. Men, I couldn't do authority with men. When men would try to tell me what to do, you can't tell me what to do. I'm going off on them again because my problems stem from what I went through with males in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had some experiences, and I tell people this all the time. I had some experience with some bad therapists, but I've also had some experiences with some amazing therapists. And I'm working with a therapist now who, I always jokingly call her the GOAT because she is amazing. And I'm talking about as far as patience. And, one of the things I looked for, I needed a Christian therapist because I'm spiritual. And I needed somebody to be as spiritual as me when I'm going in and I'm talking to you. And so just having her has been amazing. Also, on my spiritual journey, I was going to church. I had mentors in the church. One of them happened to be a minister who is like a godmother to me to this day. But we hold on to those people as a crutch. And me holding on to her as a crutch, she had to kind of let me go and I had to kind of let her go because I need to heal. I can't hold on to you and have you holding on to the same things. Yes, the pain and everything wasn't my fault, but it's my responsibility to heal it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to let her go. She had to let me go in order for both of us to come back and me being a better version of who I am. And so I think that that's what it was. But her guidance and just having somebody who is sitting there that, yeah, they never apologized to me, but she did. And having these strong women around me who apologize for I always say sins, but sins that they didn't cause and sins that they didn't commit, for them to apologize to me for that made me hurt. And so that's what really started me not being so angry anymore. And I mean, of course, as a teenager, I was addicted to alcohol. I would take pills, I would drink just to try to be numb because of the anger, because I wanted to forget, because of all of these things. But having those people I could go to that, number one, didn't judge me, and number two, again, stepped into the fire with me
Mm-hmm.
to welcome me, made me see, okay, like, maybe they are right when they say I need to change, but it took Vicky stepping into it with me to step into it a different way to say, okay, yeah, now I got to put this change in motion.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. There's two points that I wanted to go back to and visit that you had said. The first one being the church aspect, and not let me take church out of it because it's really the important part for me is God and your relationship with
right.
Christ, right? So church is also it's helpful because it's the additive, right? We need the fellowship. But how when you said she was like your spiritual mother, you mentioned
Yeah.
I find it is important to that we don't over spiritualize like our process as a human being, you know, and
Yeah.
you're around those people that may not understand, let's say if they're a Christian, like I went through something traumatic, you know, because your story is not their story. And they may,
Right.
you know, come across those people that just over like
Yeah.
spiritualize everything you're giving them is scripture, 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 you know,
Yeah.
or prayer, prayer, prayer. And that might not be the person's mindset. You know, they may need, you know, something else in addition to that, which is all and well. But it's also, you know, you want to leave the work of the clinicians, like, you know,
Right.
therapists and mental health coaches to help that person out. So you always want to
Right.
have like, you know, resources. I always say, you know, have resources where there's churches or whatever to give to your members because you can't do it all, you know.
And and I'm a
But
firm advocate for that. I believe in having God and a therapist too,
yes.
and speaking with them. And even though she was a minister, she wasn't the type that, okay, well this, you know, just throwing scriptures. She was the more of the one that was like, I'm gonna give you this, and I'm gonna be here for you, but you need to go see somebody too. So
I love that. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. And the other part, the point that I really wanted to mention is you said that you knew that you had to do the work. You know, if you
yes,
could talk to someone, because sometimes people skip over that part of, you know, I need to do the work. What portion, what was in you that you weren't so heavily trying to focus? Because sometimes people can, you know, get pinpointed on what happened, like the event, and not move from that or be so angry. Let's say it was something traumatic that happened with a person, like rape, molestation, and things like that. It happened to you, and they're so angry at the person, like they can't remove themselves out of like the event. They're still stuck there. But what caused you to like know, or what strength did you pull from to be like, I got to do this work for myself? What would you tell somebody else to like the why behind the importance of having to do the work?
okay. So the first thing I want to start off is telling somebody that healing is necessary. To get to the next phase of your life, you have to go through the process. And it's
Mm-hmm.
the most painful, it's the hardest, and it's not pretty all the time, but it's necessary. So I just want to put that out there for people that say, you know, that's probably listening and saying, well, she said healing is easy. I never said that. So, but knowing that you have to do the work is saying, do I want to stay stuck here? And doing a self evaluation. Yes, I was raped. Yes, I was molested. Yes, I was all of these things, but I knew that I could not stop. And being stuck in that, you know, you got people depending on you. Even if you by yourself, future generations depend on who you are today. And you have to just take, sometimes we have to take us out of the equation. If this was somebody else, what would I tell them? And so you want to lead by example. And even though I still have the problems with that person or with that, I still won't be around that person or alone with that person or whatever. I knew that it was still work that I needed to do for me. And it might sound cliche, but it's true. And I'm not even talking forgiveness because forgiveness is between you and God, number one, and you forgive on your own time. But healing is not for the other person, it's for you. Being able to go on with your life is for you. Being able to accomplish every goal you thought you wouldn't is for you. And because when you start realizing that and you have people talking to you, you know, you owe it to yourself to be the best version of you you can be.
Yeah.
Um, so that's why I feel like I had to change because I knew I was an angry person. I knew I was mean. I knew, but I also knew what I wanted out of my life. and I can't end up being here. And jail is not cute. I can't. And this might be like I laugh a lot, so you know me, I'm a bubbly person. But the one thing that really got me changing is because I told people orange is not my color, and I like to get my hair done too much to be behind bars. And even though it was a joke, that joke really got me to being where I am, because if I really don't want this, there's things in my life I have to do to change it.
Yes, but that's
So,
real though, right? Because
yes.
like facing, because that leads us to my other question. Even though you answered a lot of it, and my question was going to be like, what did your healing process look like? To touch on it, to dig in a little bit deeper, meaning like,
Yeah.
what was you thinking? We're gonna get into it a little bit, but if you think about like knowing yourself, like I love God. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
love me some Jesus. Okay. I'm not
Right.
ashamed to say it. I'm gonna say Jesus. Jesus is I know what he's
Right.
done for me. So I'm not ashamed to speak about my testament of what he's done. But within that, God knows me too. He knows
Right.
us as human beings. He knows my nature, your old nature, how you were, what you grew up in, your mindset. And you know yourself. So like you were saying, I'm not going to jail. Yeah, no, so it's a certain way that you have to be mindful of yourself and how you are, what triggers you, how you will show up if I need to, and then also rein that back. And like you said, what am I willing to, lose, in essence. But for you, what did healing exactly look like? Like, I mean, like, did
Yeah.
you encounter depression? Like, were you crying, or
Yeah.
what? Like, or was you just how people? I don't want to fake have answers for people like, oh, everything was just like you said. Somebody said it's not easy. Healing is not an easy journey, and that's the scary part for people sometimes. But what did it look
Right.
like?
Right, and I want to double back. Well, like you said, when you said, "Well, what do I have to lose?" And it's like I had nothing to lose. I don't have anything. So everything that I have by going to this healing process is a gain. So
Mm,
when you have nothing to lose and you at rock bottom is the best place to start building those stepping stones. But healing is hard. So I'm gonna tell anybody, and because I still go through this now with certain things that I'm healing from, healing brings on rage, and I had to sit in that rage. And one of the hardest things you can do is to sit in feelings that you try to push away so many times, and that's hard. But you have to do it because again, it's necessary. So I've had to sit in rage. I've end up having to go to Dollar Tree buying plates just to break the plates because of the rage.
mm,
I've had to sit in depression where I just lay on my couch for days on end trying to deal with it, trying to process it, number one, and not only processing it but dealing with it. When you don't speak on things, sometimes it's hard to speak. And even though we write things down, things don't change until you give it a voice. So I can write it down all day long. I can tell you my story in print all day long, but as I go back and start talking about it, and those words come out of my mouth, is uttering what I've been through, and that's hard to deal with as well. So it's those days where I sat in that depression and where I had to sit up here and cry, and when I didn't know what to do, days I didn't eat, days I didn't even open the blinds in my apartment because it was just dark. I would sit up in dark on days and evening because I work from home and made it better where okay, nobody has to see me. I can shut off the world. But and then I had days where, I sat in a rage, I sat in a depression, everything made me anxious. You start talking about it, you start opening it up. So you go through these days where you don't want to leave the house because you don't want to look over your shoulders all the time. So sitting in that anxiety. But then on the other side of that, it was days where I sat in happiness. I sat in strength because I was proud of myself because not only did I speak on something that I never thought I spoke on, but I also helped somebody else by talking about it. So having those days where you sit in that happiness, you have days when you sit in strength, you have days where you like, okay, well, I can do this, I can do this tomorrow. But then you have days where it's like, I don't want to do it no more. I actually was working on a piece the other day telling people, in the poem that I wrote, you know, please tell me, like, if you love me, please tell me that. Because right now, where I am in this process, you just feel alone. But loneliness is part of it because you have to get in that place that people can help you put the puzzle together, but you're the one in control of the pieces. All they can do is sort them and put them in a pile, but you're the one that got to put them together. You're the one that actually has to sit there and do it and spend the hours on doing that. And
mm.
so I just tell people today that even if you are in that depression, number one, it doesn't stop your progress. And number two, it's part of the process. So I think it's necessary to do, and you will come out on the other side. And it takes forever, and sometimes it feels gray. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, okay, all I see is gray. All I see is gray skies. All I feel is emptiness. But at the end of the day, it's a promise I made to myself. And if nobody else make a promise to me and keep it, I got to keep the promises I made to myself.
Yeah, yeah, and you will like it's a
Yeah.
beautiful process after you've done the work, right?
Yes.
For any of us that knows, what that work feels like in, some of the aspects in which you described it as well. It's what it is. It's the work. So I don't want people to have the concept of it's cushy because it's
It's not.
not.
It's not. And if you go in feeling like that, you going to quit before you even get
Yeah.
started. So,
Yes, you will definitely quit. Even like when you were saying you were working on a project, and you have those moments where you feel like I don't want to do this anymore. Remember, I shared with you that I'm working on my next book, right? And it's a book about a lot of it's about my mother who passed away in
mm,
'96 of breast cancer. So listen, while I'm writing, I'm literally like crying, fighting
mm,
back more tears, and just letting the tears come down. So I'm like, okay, I'm done. Like, let me just
right,
stop the process because I literally for that particular project I have to walk away and come back, even though I'm
hmm,
healed in that area. But when you start to resurface and go back because now I need this piece of information or I need all this to
right,
be able to help somebody else, you're still going to be, you're still going to have those emotional triggers. So I also don't want people to think that you're going to be miraculously healed, from every memory, every
right,
event that you experience as the person, because your body is still the body, your soul is still the soul, and you want to do soul healing, but your memories are still intact,
right,
and there. So just be mindful to give yourself grace in that particular, those seasons when when the triggers begin to affect you mentally. But let me go. Getting into my next piece, I also want to talk about what you do, what you're doing now. Also too, before I ask you that, I wanted to double back real quick. Do you journal? Like now to like add to your healing. Like, do you journal? Like, what are some healthy things that you do? Do you like exercise? Do you like go for like I don't know trips or like what do you do to like bring happiness towards your self healing journey as well?
Okay, so yeah, so actually, most of my books came from journal entries.
Mm, nice.
And so to this day, I still write, and I write like often. Poetry, the way words flow through me sometimes is how I heal. And yes, and then as far as like the walking, I have to do the walking. So recently I've had a procedure where I've lost a lot of weight, and I
Mm,
have to keep the weight loss by doing the work and exercising again. If we can do the work physically to get our bodies together, we can do the work mentally to get our minds together. So
yes.
I had to put those pieces together in doing that. So one of the things that I do is I write, and no matter what I feel, because like you said, I still have the triggers, but it's about grounding yourself in those triggers. It's so one of my biggest grounding techniques is I write, and I write what I feel. I don't care how it come out. It can be gibberish, it can be words, it can be sentences, it can be a story. And sometimes it's me just cussing on paper, filling the whole paper up with curse words. But that's the way I had to get through it. And that's
Mm,
the way I have to write it in order to get through it. Nobody got to see it
right.
but me. So that, and I mean, and I'm being real. So that's
Yeah.
some things that I've done to help. I love, like I said, I'm like an avid. I live by the lake, so I like to go and to the lake to walk, and I do different things. So I have different ways where it helps me and it grounds me and it gives me techniques and it's things that I like to do. But yes, I those are the ways that I think I do it the most. It's the writing, it's the I don't know, I'm not a performer. I haven't performed in a long time, but I'm thinking about going back to it. But
Like a
performing my
poetry, like a mic.
yes.
Oh, I
Yes.
love those. If you ever listen, if I'm in your city or if you're close to me, I'm coming to see you. I love poetry mic nights.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I'm actually doing a show. I'm thinking about doing a show for next year. I'm planning
Okay.
a whole show, so I'll keep you informed on it. So, but doing things like that, those are the things I love, and I think doing the things you love when you're going through it the most are the things that help you get through those cloudy days. So, It's the writing. I like to do my hair, so I might be this tomorrow, today, and then tomorrow I'm somebody totally different. So those things keep me grounded and keep me going into that next phase of healing.
Yes. Listen, don't get me started on hair, okay? Because you already know. Listen, the
Right.
fro this morning, I was like, it's froing right now though. It's froing.
It's cute. I
I
love
get
it.
thank you. But it will be like this today, and tomorrow it might be something else. I mean, that's just the
Right.
beauty of being a woman and being a black
Yes.
woman too. So I'm like, I can flip it and
Yes.
switch it whenever I feel like it.
Right.
Look, to include color, like I will, yeah.
Right.
I love hair. I just love the beauty of versatility. Um,
Yeah.
but I love that because I want to also put out there like how healthy it is to make sure you are doing those positive things. Like you mentioned, journaling, you write, you exercise, and all that stuff is impactful to your mental, spiritual, and physical health. And then if you don't mind sharing, how much loss, sis, have you lost so far?
So I had the procedure on July 26th. I am down 87 pounds from that day.
Oh, girl,
So
yeah, congratulations,
thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a feat. And that's a part of the process. I'm sure you have like more energy and things
Yes.
like that. I believe in taking care of our bodies. Um, More so, like I'm a certified health coach. I incorporate health coaching into like
Yeah.
mental health wise. I'm not like writing people's plans out and things like that. I just like to know how things pair for us mentally and chemically, and what we should eat to like honor
Right.
our bodies and the vitamins that we need. Because sometimes lack of things like lack of vitamin D can throw you off emotionally. And so, but it's just important, like, I find just to honor your body, but also, a lot of times when we've gone through trauma, because I've gone through
Mm.
my stints as well, and I'm like, forget it. Like, let's just, it's whatever, you stuffing whatever in
Mhm.
your face, but you're also, I'm very mindful of what's, more so too for my health, of what's in my family. So now I'm like, okay, in order to mitigate all of that, I need to take care of my body a certain
Right.
type of way. So that's important to me. But let's start talking about you now, what you're doing. I know we mentioned that you're an advocate, you're a poet and a motivational speaker, helping others who've been through similar experiences, such as yourself. And I know this is like anyone can glean from your story, so powerful, men and women, the youth. What message do you want to send to those who are still like in that dark place, feeling lost and disconnected from themselves?
So one thing I try to let people know that are still in that dark place is that number one, I just tell them you're worthy, because a lot of times when we're in that dark place, we don't see the worthiness of who we really are, and I've struggled with that for so long. So to anybody out there that's in that dark place, you're worthy, you matter, and there is life after. There is life after. Like, that does not define you. Yes, a piece of you, but it doesn't define who you are or who you become. You and only you alone, of course, with the grace of God, you become who you're destined to be.
Mm. Wonderful. I love that. Especially like I feel so important just to whether you're in a dark place, the youth for what a lot is on my heart too. Just because as when we're younger and we're faced with trauma, you don't have a lot of help with your situation. You're kind of just navigating through life, and then hopefully you'll make it to your adult years.
Right.
Not many have survived. That needs to be stated. A lot of young people have left this earth, with such trauma that they've been impacted by, or even in the midst of that trauma, from
And,
their as victimizers. I hope I'm saying the right word, that have taken
right.
their life. So I've heard some very sad stories.
And
Um,
I want to say too to those people, and I'm sorry, it's not for
yeah.
the lack of not trying. I went through those moments where I just wanted to end it all, and I didn't want to be here. So if you're struggling with that, you're speaking to a 4-time suicide attempt survivor. I tried 4 times, and when I got to the fourth time, I realized I'm here for a purpose. And I could go on for a whole nother. That'll be something off I could tell you about how I was saved from those type of situations just by having other people who care. And when somebody spoke down to me that said, "Yeah, you trying to commit suicide, but I'm here for you,"
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't even know at that moment. She didn't know at that moment that she was saving me. I had laid pills out on the dresser, and I was going to take them one by one because I'm like, I can't do it. And I got on the computer to listen to some relief, and actually listen to YouTube. I found a video with her on there speaking about her story and how she overcame. And I just started typing to her. And I'm like, I'm telling her everything, everything, everything. And I'm leaving it for in a letter. A few years later, when I graduated high school and she was coming to see me, I said, I wrote that for you that day. So somebody knew when I took my life what was really going on with me. And maybe somebody would do something about it, and we've been cool ever since. So I'm just telling people that want to give up, it's life after, and you don't need to go down that route. You don't need to do that. I was a self harm survivor. I used to cut myself just because, and I hate to bring color in it, but yes, little black girls cut themselves too. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just stigmatized to races or whatever. Yes, we take our pain out that way as well. So just having, like I said, people around me and that knew something was wrong when I didn't have to say it. If you don't have anybody to talk to, there's people out here like me that can get you to the right resources because your life matters and the brilliance inside of you should not be taken away because of things that you have faced. So,
Yes, and thank you so much for mentioning that. Because suicide and people that have suicidal tendencies, that's very close to my heart as well. Number one, because I just can't stand the spirit behind it. If we want to go
right.
spiritual for just a minute, because I know it's a demonic spirit, you
Yeah.
know. But it's just that sense of I find it so just sad, and it's very sad that people have to go to that place where they feel unworthy, unwanted, like what's the point of being here, and they take their own life, before they've had that encounter of real help, like get some help, like it's okay. And I'm so thankful that you said that it's not a race thing at all.
Hmm.
People from all nationalities that are suffering inside by themselves, like you mentioned. There are little black girls cutting themselves every day, and it's just beyond me. But I understand. I say beyond me because it's just a very like hurtful, mindful place, and I'm like, man, you don't have to do that. You're worth so much more. So thank you again for mentioning that, and I'm gonna actually leave in the description box like where I want to leave your link, of course, and also the suicide national hotline too,
Yes.
for sure. But I'm in mentioning that that place, and we can just stay there for a minute.
Hmm.
What would take you there, as far as like being suicidal? Was it just the thoughts of I'm not worthy, I don't need to be here, I don't want to deal with this trauma anymore? Or was it like you were self-attacking, or what exactly would take you to those dark places?
So the dark places started first. My mother and father met in a psych ward, which is funny. So I've never had, everybody would say, well, she won't be normal. She'll never be a normal child. But I was. My
Mm,
father was the first person who touched me inappropriately because he said the voices in his head told him to. And
mm,
so that took me to a dark place. So again, that happened at 7 years old. Then when my mother got sick, I was put into kinship care. And being put into kinship care, you're living with family, and another family member was the one who started raping me. And so in doing that, I again went into those depression. I went into that dark place because who am I? And when I got older and the abuse continued and it became more people, and then it started with the trafficking and it became more people. I started being in a dark place of nothing's going to change for me. Why am I still here?
mm,
Why am I still living? Why am I still breathing? Because this is not the life that I want. And everybody taking from me, everybody taking, pieces of me, my soul. Every time assault would occur, it felt like a piece of my soul was gone. So now that you're taking a piece of my soul, what do I do next? There's no room for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was being yelled at, it was being talked down to, it was being a black sheep. The family didn't want anything to do with me. So because of that, where do I go? I don't have family. I don't consider these people family. The cutting became so dark and a depression that I felt like I couldn't breathe until I saw myself bleed. And when you start to get that, and when I would do that and I would cut and then I would be able to breathe and then I would cut and I would cry and I would breathe, I was like, okay, well, I'm breathing through the cuts and that's not okay. So I think those were the places in my life where I tried to take my life, and being in those abusive situations, being trafficked, not knowing where to stop. There's no room for me here, and feeling that is what caused it. But again, having that support system is what got me where I am today.
Mm. Wow, it's deep. When you mention I'm breathing through the cuts,
Yeah.
it's very just be mindful. It's why it's so important to not judge, other people because you don't know what somebody is going through unless they share the entirety of their life with you, and then you don't really know because you weren't there, with them. Like you can empathize if you've experienced something similar. Sometimes it's hard for people that haven't experienced, similar things for them to understand or empathize with you. But you can just empathize as a human being, period. But it's so important not to pass judgment because a lot of times when someone has gone through such an experience, and you see people and you think like, well, why are they like this? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? Why? It's because there's something else, that's triggering all that. So of course, yes, pray for people, before
Yeah.
you start talking about them. As I always say,
Yes.
pray for them, ask them if they need help, see if they, try to seek out the help for them if they're not willing to get it themselves, but have some resources if you really care about someone. Now, moving on. I want to get a little bit into spirituality. What role of faith did that really play in your healing process, and how did it help you like reclaim your identity? How close, like, would you say that, or what is your relationship like with God look like? What does that look like for you?
So my relationship with God was troubled
Mm.
at the beginning because I'm losing my identity. Okay, God, you made me, but who am I?
Keep it real, yeah.
Keeping it real. You made me, but who am I? I'm questioning everything. You made me again, but why am I going through this?
Mm-hmm.
So it tested me, but now my faith is unmatched. You can't tell me it was through the grace of God that I'm still here. And yes, these situations. I never tell people you went through this because it was for your good, but no, I went through it. But now it's molded me into wanting to help other people who've experienced the same things that I have. And in the abuse, God was here because I didn't die like I wanted to. In the abuse, God was there because it was times where it was cold outside and I wasn't cold. It was, God in there when I didn't think I would have anything to eat, but food was still provided because of the situations I was going through. It was times in there where I might have been sold to a person I didn't know and I thought they was going to kill me and I still survived. So I look back at all of those times when I doubted God and I questioned God, and then I'm like, but in this, you were still here. In this, you still provided safety because, you still had somebody looking out for me. And any phase of my life, you still had angels around me. So that right there, it was taking a perspective. I have a friend that always say, change the narrative. And so in changing that narrative, my relationship with God became stronger because some of these were men in church. Some of these were deacons. Some of these were men that was up here on Sunday, doing the opening prayer, but then leaving their wife after church to come with a teenager. And
Mm.
so
That's real.
that made me question a lot. So my relationship with God right now is amazing. Now that church that I was affiliated with, I'm there no more.
Mm.
But the God that I serve is the one that still brought me through all of this. The one that got me speaking now and not afraid. The
Mm.
one that, because of that, I've been 8 years cut free. The one, because of that, I haven't had a drink since I was a teenager. So it's these things that I had to say. If it wasn't for the grace of God, then I wouldn't be here today. And so even with that, I everything I do, I acknowledge him in the process, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here.
Listen, I was trying to hold back. Look, I'm like, let her talk, okay? Before we start shouting on this podcast today.
Right.
I
Right.
was trying, like, biting my lip over here, like, because you won't be able to hear Amanda. But I mean, I love that, like, how you reflect, back to God, because, it's real. Number one, we are born into this earth. The Bible clearly says we are born into sin. So we
Right.
can't help the families, that we're born in. I'm sure a lot of us, to include myself sometimes, is like, why was I born into this particular family? Like, what? Like,
Right.
wait a minute. Like, wait a minute. Like, can we get a redo? No. But it's what it is. Like, you're gonna go through life, circumstances, and trials, and tribulations, and but I find it very important, because you will experience things sometimes, unfortunately, in churches, and it's not a fault to the church, as a whole, because the church is a place of fellowship,
Right.
for Christians, but they're human beings inside the building,
Right.
so it's like, because I've experienced some bad things before as well, in a church setting, but it has nothing to do with my relationship with God. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to take out my anger on, like, okay, Lord, like, I can have a real conversation with God, so I love that you're able to reflect, on how God was, there every step of the way for you personally, what he did for you personally. So not to discourage anyone if they've ever had any, a negative experience with church, I would say, like you said, change the narrative.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your relationship, though, with God, the spiritual being, and not the building, and how
Right.
often you show up or don't show up on Sundays, or if you go to Bible study or not go to Bible study, or
Right.
whatever, it's just like, how about your relationship, because sometimes, depending on work schedules, I always say, I try to, you may not be able to make the church, as often as you would like, whatever,
Right.
but that relationship needs to be strong for sure. So as we're coming to an end to our podcast, Amanda, I want to tell you, for sure, of course, your story was powerful, and I could talk to you all day, and
Yeah.
then some. I hope that you will come back on and just be a
Of
recurring
course.
guest, but you have a powerful just testament to, like, your resilience, the ability to just reclaim your life, no matter how much trauma that you've endured. You just, your light is so beautiful, and I just love
Thank
what you're
you.
doing. So I love that. I was honored for you to come on and be a guest, as I mentioned. But before we close, do you have any? Actually, I want you to have some final thoughts or words. But if you could do me a favor, because I feel like this is befitting for this particular podcast. The last, and I think it publishes. It's a pre-published, but the last submission you submitted, the poem you submitted to me. Can you read that for our followers and those that will watch this podcast? Because I feel like that would just be such a good addition to close out, to add to your final words to this particular podcast.
Of
um
course. So can you still hear me?
yeah, I can hear you, absolutely.
Okay, so yes. It's called Dear Strong Woman.
Yes.
And it's just saying say yes to you. And it says, Dear Strong Woman, this letter is for you. I came here to encourage you. I know you're tired. I know you have nothing left to give. Yet you still show up every day. Yet you brave face and smile like tomorrows have no expiration date. Say yes to you because you matter. Say yes to rest. Say yes to peace. And say yes to taking a break. Dear warrior, you deserve all good things coming to you. Our community is blessed with you. Show yourself grace because you deserve it. Show yourself love because you're worth it. Take it from me. Say yes to you because you're worth healing and you're worth help. You have a strong community of women around you to push you forward. Say yes to you always, Queen, so the strength inside of you can keep your crown lifted.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And I'm going to say, from one warrior, she read that poem, to the warriors that are listening. I know she said, "Dear strong woman," but be you male or female, you are a warrior.
Yes.
You know, if you can just glean from Amanda's story, listen, if she can do it, you can do it. If she can get through her trauma, you can get through yours. I promise you. Thank you so much, Amanda, though, for sharing your incredible, powerful journey with us. And to all our listeners, be sure to check out Amanda's books, okay? Be sure to check them out. Check out Back from Bondage, How I Broke Free, and In His Eyes, Finding My Way Back to God. So, as well as her YouTube podcast that she co-hosts. It's three other co-hosts, right?
It's
Or
two, yes.
two.
I'm the creator and founder. We have Caleb and we also have Cassandra. So we do have two other co-hosts. And we have Tim, because like I said, I bring God to everything. So he does our motivational minute. And then now we have a new resource coordinator. So if you need resources, you can reach out to us in our email and we'll give those resources to you.
Yes, I wanted you to mention them. And I'm going to, all the links are going to be provided in the description section, you all. So be sure to visit those links so that you can easily connect with Amanda and continuing following her empowering work. And before we wrap up, I want to emphasize something very important. When you've undergone traumatic experiences like Amanda has, the healing process is not something you can or should try to do or handle or unpack alone. You
It's
know,
not.
trauma has like a way of deeply affecting us on multiple levels, and it takes time, it takes support and professional help to work through it. So, therapy is a crucial part of that healing process. And again, as we mentioned, because we are believers, you know, God is a part of that process too. So, listen, Jesus plus therapy.
Yes.
it is a good thing. And seeking help is not a sign of weakness. You know, I know that, especially within the Black and Brown community, we see that as something negative, but seeking help through therapy is not a sign of weakness. It's just a step towards reclaiming your life and finding the strength to move forward. So, if you don't have a preferred therapist, I can encourage you, just want to encourage you to visit my website. There's a list of therapists, and I'm going to leave the link to that doseofencouragement.com through there. So there's therapists on there, there's mental health coaches on there as well. For those in the Black and Brown community, I have professionals that are within that Black and Brown
Mhm.
aspect. So, you know, if you feel comfortable, so you can have a therapist you're feeling comfortable with. I've also compile just other supporting entities as well. So there's support out there. So don't think that there isn't. There's support out there for you, and you're not alone in your journey. So just remember that. How do we know that? Because Amanda just shared her story to let you know you're
Right.
not alone. We've all faced some aspect of a traumatic situation, but get that healing. Get that healing. Walk your journey out. As we mentioned, healing takes work. What's the scripture? Faith without works is dead. I think that's,
Did,
yeah,
yes.
right. So I think sometimes we leave that work part out. Like, I just want to have faith. Like, you know, like
Right.
you got
No.
to do some work. You got to do some work. But thank you so much, you all, for tuning in to From Grief to Purpose podcast. I'm Coach Nina, and as always, remember, healing is a journey, and there's healing out there for you. Thank you all for tuning in. Till next time. Bye.